What if the most meticulously crafted illusion of your life crumbles not with a bang, but with a relentless, jarring ring? That's how it started for me, Nolan Westbrook. Not a polite chime, but an insistent, almost violent demand at my studio door. I was in my oldest paint-splattered shirt, a half-finished canvas drying on the easel, when Daria, my wife, burst in. She was already in her evening finery, a shimmering garnet gown, a streak of mascara trailing under one eye, her voice a whip-crack of anxiety. "My heirloom emerald earrings," she snapped, sweeping past me as if I were merely part of the furniture. No hello, no concern, just pure, unadulterated panic and the scent of expensive champagne. It was the fifth time that month she'd forgotten something crucial, racing back to retrieve it on her way to galas, corporate mixers, or exclusive brunches. Events I was never on a guest list for. But the previous night, a friend of hers had posted a candid photo from one of these girls' brunches. Daria wasn't in it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just observed. That evening, a cryptic message flashed on my phone. Be at the Lumina Grand Atrium by 8 p.m. A revelation awaits. A revelation? The last time she genuinely surprised me was in 2017, with a chocolate ganache cake and a heartfelt note that had brought me to tears for days. This time, I anticipated no sweetness, only the bitter taste of answers. I arrived in my least formal blazer, the one with a frayed cuff and shoes that had seen better decades. I wanted her to see the man I had become through years of quiet neglect. The atrium was a whirlwind of light and sound. Crystal chandeliers dripped brilliance. Laughter echoed like distant thunder, and the clink of champagne flutes was a constant melody. And there she was commanding the stage, microphone in hand. "Before we proceed with the awards," she announced, her gaze locking onto mine with chilling precision, "I have a personal, yet profoundly important, disclosure to make." She gestured for me to join her. The entire assembly turned, a sea of curious faces, and I felt as though I were walking into a public trial. "I have poured my soul into this partnership," Daria declared, her voice resonating, "but it wasn't meant for me. It was for them. But sometimes people inevitably drift apart. Sometimes one person carries an unbearable weight, while the other remains a silent observer on the periphery." A murmur rippled through the crowd, gasps, a few nervous titters. I stood frozen, caught in her spotlight. Then, with the dramatic flourish of a seasoned performer, she delivered her final blow. "I'm offering him a choice. Right here, right now, before all of you. Remain and listen, or simply walk away." The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by a hushed whisper from one of her colleagues. She actually did it. I looked at Daria, this polished, ruthless stranger, and in that moment of stark clarity, I knew exactly what I had to do. No grand pronouncements, no dramatic retorts. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my car keys, and let them jingle softly with each step as I turned and walked. 1 step, 2 steps, she didn't utter my name. 3 steps, she didn't even blink. 4 steps, a faint, knowing smile played on her lips. 5 steps, and I pushed through the opulent doors, vanishing from her carefully constructed narrative, the camera flashes, and the polite applause. But that was merely the prologue. Here's what no one tells you about walking away. Sometimes, what you discover on the other side changes everything. I didn't drive home that night. I didn't even have a destination in mind. I just walked, the keys a cold weight in my palm, the city's indifferent hum swallowing my fragmented thoughts. Somewhere between the glittering atrium doors and the desolate side street, where I eventually slumped onto a frost-kissed bench, a chilling realization dawned. She hadn't just spoken, she had performed. Every word, every calculated gesture was rehearsed. Her true intention wasn't merely to end our marriage. It was to publicly dismantle and humiliate me. She needed a stage, an audience, and a meticulously painted image of herself as the valiant martyr. And I, in her script, was to be the spineless husband, utterly incapable of keeping pace. But here's the unexpected truth about pushing someone to their absolute limit. Eventually, they stop bending. They snap, often silently. And when that happens, a new kind of awareness takes root. I didn't sleep a wink. I remained on that cold bench until the first tentative rays of dawn pierced the concrete canyons. My phone buzzed 5 times. 4 generic messages from attendees, lamenting the awkwardness or praising Daria's courage. One message, however, was from an unknown number. You don't know me, but you need to see this. She's not who you believe her to be. Attached was a short video file. My hands trembled as if I'd just survived a violent impact. I tapped play. There was Daria. The same garnet gown, the same captivating smile. But this wasn't the gala floor. It was backstage in a secluded green room, hours before her performance. She was with him, the finance executive, the one with the impeccably tailored suits and that infuriatingly smug jawline. His hands were clasped intimately at her waist. I heard her whisper, "Are you certain he'll just walk away?" He grinned, a predatory flash of teeth. "If not," he murmured, "we'll ensure he's pushed." A wave of nausea washed over me, a gut-wrenching certainty that went beyond mere heartache. This wasn't about a marriage simply fading. This was a calculated setup, a meticulously orchestrated charade. They wanted me gone, a clean break, no messy legal entanglements, no division of assets. Just me, disappearing from the stage, so they could seamlessly rewrite their narrative. And I had played my part flawlessly. I wanted to roar, to call her, to demand an explanation for how long this deception had been in the works. Instead, I saved the video. For once, I would not react. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would not allow her to turn this into another theatrical production. I would wait. I would observe. I would let her believe she had won. And then I would reclaim everything piece by agonizing piece. But the very next morning, Daria made a move I hadn't anticipated, a twist that transformed everything into something far more intricate and perilous. The next morning unfolded with an almost surreal detachment. Sleep had been an alien concept. My eyes burned, raw from staring into the void. My body ached from a night spent on an unforgiving park bench. Yet, the thought of returning to that house, our house, no, her house, was unbearable. It hadn't truly been mine for months. I just hadn't permitted myself to acknowledge the quiet erosion. The subtle shifts in her tone, the suddenly locked drawers, the endless stream of exclusive events to which I was never invited. But now I held undeniable proof. And with that proof came a piercing, terrifying clarity. I found myself standing outside Finn Jorgensen's apartment. We hadn't truly connected in nearly a year, not since he moved in with his girlfriend, and our late-night gaming sessions and cheap whiskey nights became distant memories. But I had nowhere else to go. I knew if I didn't knock, I would simply disintegrate in that cold hallway. He opened the door, his eyes wide with unasked questions, yet he welcomed me in without a word. I gave him the abridged version, the atrium spectacle, the public ultimatum, the devastating video. He didn't offer a patronizing, "I told you so," though he easily could have. He simply pressed a steaming mug of coffee into my hands and said, "Whatever Daria is planning, you need to get ahead of it, Nolan. Now." Then the doorbell chimed. I froze. Too early for deliveries, too random for mere coincidence. Finn answered while I hovered, barely concealed, behind him. A courier stood on the landing, holding a large, pristine white envelope addressed to me. No return address. My hand trembling, I signed for it, then slowly, deliberately, tore it open. The blood drained from my face. Inside were two items, a glossy photo and a crisply typed letter. The photo depicted Daria and the same executive from the video, his arm possessively around her waist as she leaned into him, a kiss pressed to his neck. It bore a timestamp. Not recent. 6 months ago. 6 months. The letter was cold, professionally sterile, and utterly devastating. Since you've chosen to walk away, I'm assuming you understand the implications. I've already consulted my attorney. Divorce papers will be arriving shortly. I suggest you cooperate quietly. The house will remain mine. Frankly, there's no logical reason to drag this through the courts. Let's simply make this amicable. Daria, she didn't want closure. She wanted to erase me. This entire elaborate scheme, the public humiliation, the legal maneuvers, the emotional ambush, it was all designed to rewrite our entire marriage as her mistake. And if I played my designated part incorrectly, I would be immortalized as the bitter, forgettable man who had simply walked out, unable to handle her brilliance. I sat in stunned silence, clutching the letter as if it were soaked in poison. And that's when Finn spoke, his voice igniting a spark of defiance I hadn't realized still flickered within me. She thinks you're defeated. That's why she's rushing this. Because if you vanish quietly, she wins. I didn't crave vengeance. I didn't want to inflict pain. I simply wanted the truth to hold meaning again. I wanted myself to matter. And the first step was to dig deeper. Because if she was capable of such an elaborate lie, what else had she been concealing? What I unearthed next didn't just shock me. It forced me to question if I had ever truly known the woman I married at all. I spent most of that day pacing Finn's cramped apartment, a man trapped in a borrowed skin. The photo, the letter, the public spectacle at the atrium, it all converged into one devastating truth. Daria had been meticulously orchestrating my obliteration for months, and I, like a sleepwalker, had stumbled directly into her trap. But here's the insidious nature of betrayal. Once it cracks open, everything else begins to seep out. I couldn't shake the unsettling sensation that what I'd seen was merely the visible tip of a submerged iceberg. Her letter, with its calm, professional menace, suggested she had every detail meticulously planned. The house, the divorce terms, even the public narrative. But one phrase echoed relentlessly in my mind. Let's simply make this amicable. She had never uttered such a phrase in our 10 years together. It didn't sound like her. It sounded rehearsed, a calculated line designed to intimidate me, to ensure I remained quiet, passive, just as I had been for years. So, a new resolve solidified within me. I decided to stop being passive. Finn, surprisingly adept with tech, helped me begin our search on an old tablet. Daria had forgotten I still had access to an older model we once shared for calendars and bills. She hadn't touched it in over a year. It was buried in a dusty drawer in my old nightstand, an item I'd grabbed in a desperate, unthinking rush when I left. I hadn't even remembered packing it. It still held synced access to her emails, her cloud backup, her entire photo archive. Within minutes, we uncovered dozens of fragments I wished I could unsee. There were recurring calendar invites, deceptively labeled executive strategy sessions, yet their locations were consistently exclusive hotels. Always the same dates, always at 7 p.m. on weekdays. No attachments, no meeting links, just vague titles and addresses. I checked one, then another. Each time, the same man from the video appeared in candid photos stored on her phone, tucked away in folders innocuously titled grocery lists or workout plans. These folders contained selfies, intimate videos, precise location pings. Some are months old. Some were taken while I was texting her, asking if she was safe when she claimed to be working late. She hadn't just moved on. She had replaced me long ago, transforming me into a placeholder while she meticulously built an entirely separate life in the shadows. Her growing silence, her glacial coldness, the way she would stare at her phone, a private smile playing on her lips when she thought I wasn't watching. It had all been her quiet goodbye, long before I ever understood the need to leave. But it wasn't merely the affair. That almost would have been simpler to comprehend. It was the chilling way she documented everything, like a meticulous archivist collecting evidence, not creating memories. Finn leaned over my shoulder as we scrolled through her emails. Nolan, this isn't just cheating. This looks like a strategic campaign. Then came the unequivocal confirmation. An email dated 6 weeks before the atrium debacle. Subject, transition timeline. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't work-related. It was from a real estate agent. She was in the advanced stages of purchasing a luxury condo, solely in her name. And within the email thread, she explicitly stated that the divorce will be handled cleanly, as he won't put up a fight. She wrote that about me, as if I were a predictable variable, a foregone conclusion. I sat there, stunned, breathing through a white-hot rage I never knew I possessed. Not because she wanted to leave, but because she had crafted the illusion so flawlessly I hadn't even realized I was already gone. But the most devastating twist was yet to come, because when I checked her sent messages, I found something intended for someone else. Sent the very night I walked out of the atrium. A message that proved this wasn't just about me. It involved someone I trusted implicitly, someone who had been complicit from the very beginning. Ready to learn the shocking truth that made my world completely unravel? There's a precise moment when betrayal transcends mere emotion and becomes a calculated, strategic maneuver. That was the profound shift I experienced as I stared at the screen, scrolling through Daria's sent emails, desperately trying to comprehend the sheer depth of this conspiracy. I had mistakenly believed I was a heartbroken husband uncovering a painful affair. But the reality was far darker, meticulously coordinated, and it implicated someone I had never, in my wildest nightmares, suspected. The message had been dispatched at 11:17 p.m., mere hours after my public departure from the atrium. The subject line, Phase 2. That alone sent a shiver down my spine. But what truly turned my blood to ice was the recipient. Finn. Yes, Finn. The same Finn who had offered me coffee as I crumbled, who had given me his couch, who had declared, whatever Daria is planning, you need to get ahead of it. I had believed he was my last remaining ally, my steadfast friend. But the email screamed a different narrative. He walked exactly as you predicted. Do not mention anything about the condo yet. I'll finalize the paperwork this week. If he asks questions, maintain plausible deniability. Crucially, ensure he doesn't access the old tablet. He might still have login details, and that would severely complicate matters. Let's keep this operation perfectly clean. I'll connect with the lawyer again on Monday. I couldn't breathe. The air felt like sharp shard in my throat. My gaze drifted across the room to Finn. He was heating up leftover stir-fry, casually recounting a film he wanted us to watch later. Was every comforting pat on the shoulder, every reassuring, I've got your back, man, a fabricated lie? Was he merely managing me on her behalf? I snapped the tablet shut. He turned, a questioning look on his face. You all right, Nolan? I offered no response. Instead, I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection. The face staring back at me no longer felt familiar. I wasn't merely a husband, nor just a friend. I was a target, a naive, oblivious pawn in a sinister game orchestrated by others. But now, my pain was overshadowed by a searing fury. I was awake. I waited until after midnight. I lay on that lumpy couch, feigning sleep, acutely aware of Finn's muffled movements, the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator, his occasional cough. Then, I slipped out of the apartment as silently as a shadow, the tablet and the damning envelope tucked securely in my bag. I took nothing else. I didn't need a direct confrontation yet. What I needed was leverage, and I knew precisely the person to call. There was one person Daria had consistently underestimated, her sister, Neve. They barely tolerated each other. Their relationship a constant clash of values, finances, and Neve's steadfast refusal to engage in social pleasantries. But Neve, she had always liked me, respected me. She often remarked I was too decent for Daria. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, but I distinctly recalled something she'd once told me after one of our particularly fraught Thanksgiving dinners. If she ever crosses a line you can't live with, call me. I'll help you burn the bridge behind you. I dismissed it as a dark joke then. It wasn't. I messaged her. A reply flashed back in under 2 minutes. Come over. I've been waiting for this day. Neve's apartment was a stark reflection of her character. Sharp, uncluttered, brutally honest. Nothing about it pretended to be more than it was. I hadn't seen her in what felt like an eternity, perhaps since that contentious Christmas dinner where Daria arrived 2 hours late and barely met my eye. Neve had noticed everything, even then, but she hadn't pushed. She had simply poured me another glass of wine and offered a quiet, "You deserve better than a woman who treats you like an afterthought." Now, I stood at her door, carrying a bag laden with betrayal and a heart that felt utterly dislocated. She offered no hug. She opened the door, gave a single, knowing nod, and remarked, "Took you long enough, Nolan." I stepped inside. She didn't press for details. She simply pointed to her kitchen table, and I methodically laid out everything. The letter, the photo, the incriminating email to Finn. I recounted the story of the old tablet, the hidden videos, the fake executive strategy sessions, the clandestine real estate deal Daria had been orchestrating. I held nothing back. When I finished, I half expected Neve to say, "I told you so," or something equally bitter. Instead, she looked at me, her expression grim, and said, "That's not even half of it, Nolan." She vanished into her bedroom, returning moments later with a small, unadorned wooden box. Inside were printed screenshots, ancient text logs, even a discreet flash drive. She slid it across the table toward me, as if presenting a live grenade. I started keeping tabs after she began cutting herself off from the family. Neve explained quietly. "You weren't the only one she ghosted. She stopped showing up for mom's doctor's appointments, ignored calls from our aunt when she was in hospice. And when I confronted her, she blamed you. Said you were emotionally stifling her, preventing her from growing. Claimed she had to sever toxic ties to become her best self. My stomach churned. Neve continued. She lied to everyone, not just about the affair. About her job, her finances, even her past. The man she's with? This isn't his first married woman. He has a pattern. He gets deeply involved, helps them dismantle their old lives and start fresh, then moves on once the chaos settles. I was reeling. So, Daria was merely a puppet in his scheme? Neve shook her head sharply. No, Nolan. She's the one holding the scissors. He's just her perfectly crafted excuse. She then showed me a screenshot from months earlier, an email Daria had accidentally forwarded to a mutual contact. It was a draft of a prenuptial agreement, a new one, clearly intended for someone else. She wasn't just leaving me. She was systematically preparing to replace me in every role I had ever held: husband, partner, even family member. I was being meticulously erased, rewritten out of my own story. But I wasn't the sole victim. Neve leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Do you remember Aunt Meredith's inheritance? I nodded slowly, a dawning horror gripping me. The one Daria claimed never materialized. She lied. It had come through. You were both listed as joint beneficiaries, but Daria accepted the entire sum alone. She signed off without telling you. She forged your signature. I found out 6 months ago, but I couldn't prove it until now. That was the breaking point. Not a surge of rage, but a chilling, resolute purpose. This wasn't merely emotional betrayal. This was calculated theft, intricate manipulation, blatant fraud. She had been painstakingly constructing a version of herself that necessitated my quiet, humiliating disappearance so she could effortlessly transition into her next life, entirely unburdened. But she had gravely miscalculated. She believed I would remain silent. I met Neve's steady gaze, and she gave a calm, affirming nod. Do we burn her down? She asked. No. I responded, a new strength in my voice. We bring out the truth. Every single, devastating piece of it. 2 days later, I found myself in the sleek, minimalist office of Celeste Blackwood. If Daria had a reputation for crafting elaborate illusions, Celeste possessed an equally formidable one for systematically demolishing them. She was a forensic financial investigator, as sharp and unforgiving as broken glass, and twice as dangerous if aimed with precision. Neve had worked with her previously during a friend's brutal custody battle and assured me Celeste had an uncanny talent for unearthing secrets people desperately wanted to keep buried. I handed her the flash drive, the intricate email trail, and a copy of the inheritance paperwork Neve had managed to unearth. Celeste reviewed it all, her expression unreadable. She's sloppy, she stated flatly, without looking up. She assumed your quiet nature meant compliance. But I've seen this pattern countless times. People who control through manufactured chaos mistakenly interpret silence as weakness. What truly means, Nolan, is that we're quietly collecting every single piece of evidence while they exhaust themselves with their own theatrics. The strategy was elegantly simple. Do not engage Daria on her terms. No shouting matches, no emotional breakdowns, just cold, calculated exposure. Timing will be paramount. Celeste swiftly drafted a legal freeze on all shared accounts, bolstered by the irrefutable evidence of financial fraud concerning the inheritance. We then filed an injunction against the condo purchase, citing spousal deception and the concealed transaction that had been in motion long before our separation was publicly declared. Within 72 hours, Daria's meticulously laid plans began to unravel. She didn't know yet, but she soon would. Meanwhile, I completely ghosted Finn. He tried calling twice. I didn't answer. He sent a pleading text. I didn't have a choice, man. She promised to clear my debt. I never replied. Let him stew. Let him agonize over how much I knew and how far I was willing to go. This is what happens when you turn a blind eye to betrayal. Then came a night Daria finally reached out. After almost a week of chilling silence, she sent a message, as if nothing had transpired. Hey, hope you're doing well. Can we meet and discuss things like adults? No drama, just some closure. Closure? That word again. The same word she'd wielded during her staged humiliation at the atrium. The same word she likely used to justify systematically emptying our joint accounts before I could even react. I agreed to the meeting, but I insisted on choosing the location, a modest, unpretentious bistro she once disdainfully called too provincial, too honest. Perfect. She swept in, looking utterly untouched by the recent chaos. Not a single strand of her impeccably styled hair out of place. An expensive cashmere coat, a practiced, saccharine smile, her voice modulated to a soft, empathetic tone. "You look, well," she offered, as if I were a distant acquaintance she held vague, pleasant memories of. I simply nodded, offering no words. She launched into a carefully rehearsed monologue about how regrettable it was that things had become messy, but that we could still walk away clean, assuring me she had already consulted her lawyer and prepared a fair settlement. I calmly placed a slim folder on the table between us. She looked down. Her carefully constructed smile faltered, then froze. Inside was a concise summary of Celeste's findings: the bank freeze order, the halted condo transaction, and a devastating statement outlining her forged signature on the inheritance acceptance. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she closed the folder. "You don't want to do this, Nolan," she whispered, her voice laced with a new, raw edge. "No," I replied, my voice steady clear. "I didn't, but you did." The silence that enveloped us was suffocating. For the first time, I saw it. Genuine fear behind her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, but pure, stunned terror. Because for the very first time, she had lost control of the narrative. I wasn't just walking away quietly. I was walking directly through the inferno she had ignited, and I was bringing the unvarnished truth with me. "My legal team will be in touch," I stated, rising from the table with Celeste's lawyer, who had been waiting nearby. And then I left her sitting there, alone, surrounded by the wreckage of plans that had suddenly, catastrophically collapsed. The ensuing legal battle wasn't brief, but it was remarkably clear-cut. Once Celeste's irrefutable evidence was presented in court, the judge required no further convincing. The condo, its purchase blocked, was eventually sold off. The inheritance investigation was reopened, with Daria compelled to return half the funds, plus significant damages. Finn, he simply vanished from both our lives after receiving a subpoena he never anticipated. And Daria? She attempted to play the victim in court, but even her own lawyer appeared visibly weary of her by the second hearing. The silence that followed was the most profound reward. No more theatrical dramas, no more insidious gaslighting, no more walking on eggshells within my own home. I moved into a small, unassuming cottage just outside town, nestled by a serene lake I hadn't even known existed until Neve found the listing. She even helped me paint the porch a tranquil blue and plant tomato vines in the backyard. Sometimes she still swings by on weekends, bringing a homemade pie, a quiet reminder that not all ties are meant to be severed. Some, she reminds me, are simply waiting to be truly honored. I don't know if I'll ever find love again. That isn't the central point. The profound lesson is this: I'm no longer the man who passively allowed someone else to dictate the story of his life. I am the one holding the pen now. And Daria? She faded. The same way every carefully constructed mask inevitably slips when there's no one left to impress. So, if you're reading this, if someone once stood before you and issued a public ultimatum, hoping you would shrink, hoping you would silently vanish, remember this: you're not only allowed to walk away, but you can do so not in shame, but in undeniable strength. This is my story's true ending. If it resonated with you, even in the smallest way, I want to hear yours. What's one unexpected moment that completely changed your own narrative? Share your story, because even the quietest voices can shake the walls when the truth finally comes to light.